This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 19th of June 2023 at home in Wicklow, and it is an episode dedicated to blips. That's right, you heard me, blips. You're a blip, I'm a blip. And you might think I'm referring to a blip in that more typical way of a blip being a little mistake or a glitch. I'm not saying that at all. I'm really thinking of us more like a blip moving across a heart monitor. Blip, blip, blip. One of those kind of blips. But I look at this idea of how random life is and how random our meetings with other people are. And I just feel like we're these tiny blips moving across a vast, yes, I use the word matrix again and again as I describe this metaphor, but I'm not stealing it from the Wachowski sisters now, as it is. I'm just looking at that, the randomness and the sort of unpredictability and the unknowability and how that plays out or how it affects us, or and again, as I say, just the lack of control we have in all of that. I also talk about one of my recurring themes, the travelling alone in the universe idea, how no one else can really truly know your interiority, your internal space. And if you get close to that with someone, it's something quite miraculous. And in the area of random meetings, I read the opening pages of a famous Russian novel in the middle of the podcast, because I just wanted to look at that. And then I speak about a train journey I used to like taking, and a journey in general that I used to like taking. And yes, I finish up with a bit of a back and forth account of my weekend. Oh, what a thrill that will be for you to listen to that. It did involve Father's Day, so that was nice. And even though I don't say it in the episode, I did get a very nice laminated poem from my daughter, which I'm not sure if I'll ever share that with anyone. So there you go. That's very withholding of me. Okay, anyway, that's what's coming up. Lots of different things. And I hope you like what you hear. See you around the corner. Bye.
Ooh, not gonna change my mind. Leaving the dream behind. Keep my emoji inside.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear, and you're listening to The Clear Out. You're very welcome. How are you? How's it going? Who have you met on your journey of late? Who have you encountered? Who has life put in your path? It's all very random, really. It's all very random. And I don't want to literally take the metaphor of the Matrix from the Matrix movies, but sometimes it's hard not to think of us, of we humans, as mere blips passing along a vast matrix of interaction, living out our lives and intersecting with others and having our journeys deviate or stop or continue in the same direction. Perhaps we travel in parallel to another blip that we never know about. And life's circumstances dictate the trajectory. Life's circumstances dictate the speed, the velocity with which we travel. And I think if you think about the people you've met in your life, and you think about timing, the when of the meeting, the when the meeting occurred, that timing is something over which you've no control. You don't know where that person has come from, where they otherwise would have gone had they not met you. And it's so random. It's so random in what form you'll meet someone at any point in time. It's so random what they're going to bring to the encounter. It's so random what that meeting will result in. Will it result in a friendship, a relationship, a dalliance of some kind? Will it just be a bump? And that's not euphemistic. Will it just be a bump and an excuse me, and you move on and you keep travelling? A tip of the hat, a tug of the forelock, a brief moment's eye contact. Again, it's so random. And even with people you know, even with people you've known for a long time, friends, family members, partners, whatever, their journey, even though it can be closely connected to yours or be adjacent to yours or in some way be moving in the same world as yours, it's ultimately their own journey. It's ultimately their own journey. I come back to the travelling alone in the universe theory, concept, whatever you want to call it. That's what I believe we're all doing one way or another. No matter how involved we are in the lives of others, no matter who we're involved with or to whom we're attached, we're always travelling alone, ultimately. I don't know what level of transparency or telepathy or symbiosis would have to exist between two people for one to say of the other, you're not alone, I'm with you. In the truest sense, when thinking of one's interiority, the internal journey, the internal negotiation, no one else can be in that space. No one else can occupy the same space that you occupy. I know from a recent podcast I listened to that was one of the rules from the 90s, Jean-Claude Van Damme, sci-fi actioner, time cop. One of the rules of time travel was you can't touch yourself in the future. Because you can't occupy the same space. That's one of the rules. You can't occupy the same space as your future self. I'm already stumbling because the second I said even a toe tip into the world of science or physics, I have an instinctive mental shutdown, an intellectual shutdown that says, go no further. You know not of which you speak. Silence yourself, fool. But yeah, in any case, we never know. We never know what's going on, really, truly, in someone else's innermost spaces. So the point I was making was that even though you may think, no, I've known this person for a long time, I've known this person my whole life, you still never really know unless there's some extraordinary level of of sharing, of shared insight, and it's just kind of inconceivable, the idea that you could just sort of take someone else's version of themselves as read, because we can be our own most unreliable narrators. We can be our own most unreliable tellers of our own tale, because that's informed by so many different things, so many different knocks and stumbles and hurts and grievances and agendas and world building, or if not world building, conviction building. And the whole idea, this is a whole philosophical field, like what can we actually know? What can be known really, truly? And as I've declared before, I remain largely uninterested in the empirical answering of that question, in the scientific answering of that question. I go with my gut on so many things, and I go, that'll do me for now. That'll do me for now. And I try to be evidence-based in terms of my experience of a person, in terms of being exposed to a person's behaviour, where patterns are usually quite easily detectable, and that's often what I base my feeling on. And also the feeling is based on the feeling I get from them. And then that gets a little bit wishy-washy, a bit abstract. But yeah, I come back to the grid, the matrix, and the, what is it now? Are we 7 odd billion blips blipping along on the matrix, the grid, the template, moving. I mean, really moving so incessantly and living out the lives of blips so relentlessly that our little brains can't even grasp it. And it's, yeah, what's the point I'm trying to make? I'm asking myself. The point I'm trying to make is, it's, if you gain any semblance of certainty or any sense of dependability, stability, reliability in another person, I think that's close to a minor miracle. Does that sound very cynical? Does it? It's not meant to. It's not meant to. But we really, I don't know, in a way it feels like our trajectory, our own individual trajectory, ultimately never really deviates. No matter who happens to us, no matter what happens to us. Like deep down, see, again, I come back to this probably very essentialist position, which is deep down underneath everything. There's this base state that I choose to believe is benign, and simply objectively interested in our thriving and our well-being, and our staying alive in the best possible way. And that base state doesn't really change. And maybe that's what I'm saying is the equivalent, because the base state then will have its own instinct, its own impulse, and its own trajectory, and its own pace. And I don't know. I mean, I guess something radical can happen to alter that base state. Some major event for the, I don't know, maybe that's a change in brain chemistry, in brain wiring, in brain function. Now, if I say that, it suggests that I'm locating that base state in the brain, and I never think of it that way. In fact, I think for some reason the way I conceive of the base state, it's down low. It's in the basement of us, and I don't consider the brain the basement. So, I'm revealing my own prejudice, my suspicion and my circumspection around locating our driving force, our core state in the brain. I suppose I'm going for instinct over cognition. As ever on the clear out, I'm thinking in my seat, thinking on my feet, thinking in my seat. But yeah, I've been sort of taken with this idea over the last little while of and it's the third time I've used this word. Maybe I've used it even more this episode already. The random nature of human interaction, of human intervention, of human intermingling, and all the different ways that can impact us, and all the different states, the endless variables at play when one blip meets another blip, and what each blip brings to the moment. And I maintain that we have no control over that, really. We've no control over what we're bringing at any one time. I mean, we're just the product of our lives to date. We're just the product of our own understanding of ourselves. We're a product of a version of understanding. We're a product of a stage of understanding, a stage of insight. I like to tell myself that the learnings will continue, that there are always new things to learn, new insights to be gained that will be of use, that will be of service, that will help me do better. And what does that mean? To do better, to find myself more at ease in the world, to find myself calmer, to find myself more accepting, more resolute. Does anybody aspire to be dissolute? Is that a thing? I want to be all over the place. I want to be chaos. Maybe some people do. again, who knows? Who knows? That's up to you, you blip. You have to work that out for yourself. And maybe you're asking yourself, well, how much can a blip know? How much can a blip know? Well, you're one of those blips. If you're going to go with my model, you're one of those blips, as am I. And even this, if you find yourself listening to this, this is one blip speaking to another. And maybe this will affect your trajectory. Maybe you'll find yourself moving very fast in the opposite direction, as quickly as you can possibly move away from my point, my coordinates on the axis, the XY axis of this matrix. Maybe like, get me the hell out of here. Hard reverse. Yeah. Now, I'm not sure where or in what way I may return to this starting point. But, and this may feel very random, but I'm going to read you at the beginning of a story. It's not my story. That would be wonderful. Or it might not be wonderful, depending on what you like. But I'm going to read you the beginning of a story which introduces two characters and their first meeting. And you may recognize it, and you may not recognize it, but it's something. It's something of this story, which is in fact a novel, a literary novel. It's a bit of a spirit animal for the podcast. So if you've been a regular listener, you'll probably make a good stab at guessing what this is. But in any case, I felt before coming on to record, I felt, I might just read a chunk from the beginning of this story and see what it raises. So without further ado, I'll begin. Towards the end of November, during a warm spell, at around 9 o'clock in the morning, a train of the Petersburg-Warsaw line was approaching Petersburg at full steam. It was so damp and foggy that dawn could barely break. 10 paces to right or left of the line, it was hard to make out anything at all through the carriage windows. Among the passengers, there were some who were returning from abroad, but the third-class compartments were more crowded, and they were all petty business folk from not far away. Everyone was tired, as usual. Everyone's eyes had grown heavy overnight. Everyone was chilled. Everyone's face was pale yellow, matching the colour of the fog. In one of the third-class carriages, at dawn, 2 passengers found themselves facing each other just by the window. Both young men, both travelling light, both unfashionably dressed, both with rather remarkable physiognomies, and both, finally, willing to get into conversation with each other. If they had known what was so remarkable about the one and the other at that moment, they would certainly have marvelled at the chance that had so strangely seated them facing each other in the third-class carriage of the Petersburg-Warsaw train. One of them was of medium height, about 27 years old, with curly, almost black hair and small but fiery grey eyes. He had a broad, flat nose and high cheekbones. His thin lips were constantly twisting into a sort of impudent, mocking, and even malicious smile. But his forehead was high and well formed, and made up for the lack of nobility in the lower part of his face. Especially notable was the deathly pallor of his face, which gave the young man's whole physiognomy an exhausted look, despite his rather robust build, and at the same time suggested something passionate to the point of suffering, which was out of harmony with his insolent and coarse smile and his sharp, self-satisfied gaze. He was warmly dressed in an ample lambskin coat covered with black cloth, and had not been cold during the night, while his neighbour had been forced to bear on his chilled back all the sweetness of a damp Russian November night, for which he was obviously not prepared. He was wearing a rather ample and thick sleeveless cloak with an enormous hood, the sort often worn by winter travellers somewhere far abroad, in Switzerland or northern Italy, for instance, certainly not reckoning on such long distances as from Ayduken to Petersburg. But what was proper and quite satisfactory in Italy turned out to be not entirely suitable to Russia. The owner of the cloak with the hood was a young man, also about 26 or 27 years old, slightly taller than average, with very blonde, thick hair, sunken cheeks, and a sparse, pointed, nearly white little beard. His eyes were big, blue, and intent. Their gaze had something quiet but heavy about it, and was filled with that strange expression by which some are able to guess at first sight that the subject has the falling sickness. The young man's face, however, was pleasant, fine, and dry, but colourless, and now even blue with cold. From his hands dangled a meagre bundle made of old, faded foulard, containing apparently all his travelling possessions. On his feet he had thick-soled shoes with gaiters, all not the Russian way. His black-haired companion in the lambskin coat took all this in, partly from having nothing to do, and finally asked, with that tactless grin which sometimes expresses so unceremoniously and carelessly people's pleasure in their neighbours' misfortunes, "Chilly?" And he hunched his shoulders. "Very," his companion replied with extreme readiness. "And note that this is a warm spell. What if it were freezing? It didn't even occur to me that it was so cold at home. I'm unaccustomed to it." "Coming from abroad, are you?" "Yes, from Switzerland." "Whew, fancy that." The black-haired man whistled and laughed. They got to talking. The readiness of the blonde young man in the Swiss cloak to answer all his swarthy companion's questions was astonishing, and betrayed no suspicion of the utter carelessness, idleness, and impropriety of some of the questions. In answering them, he said, among other things, that he had indeed been away from Russia for a long time, more than 4 years, that he had been sent abroad on account of illness, some strange nervous illness like the falling sickness or St. Vitus's dance, some sort of trembling and convulsions. Listening to him, the swarthy man grinned several times. He laughed particularly when, to his question, "And did they cure you?" the blond man answered, "No, they didn't." "Ha! Got all that money for nothing, and we go believing them," the swarthy man remarked caustically. "That's the real truth," a poorly dressed gentleman who was sitting nearby broke into the conversation, some sort of encrusted copying clerk, about 40 years old, strongly built, with a red nose and a pimply face. "The real truth, sir. They just draw all Russian forces to themselves for nothing." "Oh, you're quite wrong in my case," the Swiss patient picked up in a soft and conciliatory voice. Of course, I can't argue because I don't know everything, but my doctor gave me some of his last money for the trip and kept me there for almost 2 years at his own expense. What? You mean there was nobody to pay? Asked the swarthy man. Mr. Pavlishev, who supported me there, died 2 years ago. Then I wrote here to General Epanchin's wife, my distant relation, but I got no answer. So with that I've come back. Come back where, though? You mean where will I be staying? I don't really know yet. So you haven't decided yet? And both listeners burst out laughing again. And I suppose that bundle contains your whole essence? The swarthy man asked. I'm ready to bet it does, the red-nosed clerk picked up with an extremely pleased air. And that there's no further belongings in the baggage car. Though poverty's no vice, that again is something one can't help observing. It turned out to be so. The blonde young man acknowledged it at once, and with extraordinary alacrity. Your bundle has a certain significance all the same, the clerk went on after they had laughed their fill. Remarkably, the owner of the bundle, looking at them, finally started laughing himself, which increased their merriment. And though you can bet it doesn't contain any imported gold packets of Napoleon d'Ors or Friedrich d'Ors or any Dutch yellow boys, a thing that might be deduced merely from the gaiters enclosing your foreign shoes, but if to your bundle we were to add some supposed relation as General Epanchin's wife, then your bundle would take on a somewhat different significance. Naturally, only in the case that General Epanchin's wife is indeed your relation, and you didn't make a mistake out of absent-mindedness, which is quite human, well, say from an excess of imagination. Oh, you've guessed right again, the blonde young man picked up. I am indeed almost mistaken. That is, she's almost not my relation, so that I really wasn't surprised in the least when they didn't answer me there. I even expected it. Wasted your money franchising the letter for nothing? But at any rate, you're simple-hearted and sincere, which is commendable. And General Epanchin we know, sir, essentially because he's a generally known man. And the late Mr. Pavlishev, who supported you in Switzerland, we also knew, sir. If it was Nikolai Andreevich Pavlishev, because there were 2 cousins. The other one is still in the Crimea. But the deceased Nikolai Andreevich was a respectable man and with connections and owned 4,000 souls in his time, sir. Just so. His name was Nikolai Andreevich Pavlishev. And having responded, the young man looked intently and inquisitively at Mr. Know-it-all. These Mr. Know-it-alls are occasionally, even quite frequently, to be met with in a certain social stratum. They know everything. All the restless inquisitiveness of their minds and all their abilities are turned irresistibly in one direction, certainly for lack of more important life interests and perspectives, as a modern thinker would say. The phrase, they know all, implies, however, a rather limited sphere, where so-and-so works, who he is acquainted with, how much he is worth, where he was governor, who he is married to, how much his wife brought him, who his cousins are, who his cousins twice removed are, etc., etc., all in the same vein. For the most part, these know-it-alls go about with holes at the elbows and earn a salary of 17 rubles a month. The people whose innermost secrets they know would, of course, be unable to understand what interests guide them, and yet many of them are positively consoled by this knowledge that amounts to a whole science. They achieve self-respect and even the highest spiritual satisfaction. Besides, it is a seductive science. I have known scholars, writers, poets, political activists who sought and found their highest peace and purpose in this science, who positively made their careers by it alone. During this whole conversation, the swarthy young man kept yawning, looking aimlessly out of the window and waiting impatiently for the end of the journey. He seemed somehow distracted, very distracted, all but alarmed, was even becoming somehow strange. Sometimes he listened without listening, looked without looking, laughed without always knowing or understanding himself why he was laughing. "But excuse me, with whom do I have the honour?" the pimply gentleman suddenly addressed the blonde young man with the bundle. "Prince Lev Nikolaevich Myshkin," the other replied with full and immediate readiness. "Prince Myshkin? Lev Nikolaevich? Don't know it, sir. Never even so much as heard it, sir," the clerk replied, pondering. "I don't mean the name. The name's historical. It can and should be found in Karamzin's history. I mean the person, sir. There's no Prince Myshkin to be met with anywhere, and even the rumours have died out." "Oh, that's certain," the prince answered at once. "There are no Prince Myshkins at all now, except me. It seems I'm the last one. And as for our fathers and grandfathers, we've even had some farmers among them. My father, however, was a second lieutenant in the army, from the Junkers. But I don't know in what way Mrs. Epanchin also turns out to be Princess Myshkin, also the last in her line." "The last in her line." "What a way to put it," the clerk tittered. The swarthy man also smiled. The blonde man was slightly surprised that he had managed to make a pun, though a rather bad one. "And imagine, I never thought what I was saying," he finally explained in surprise. That's clear, sir," the clerk merrily agreed. "And say, Prince, did you do any studying there at your professor's?" the swarthy man suddenly asked. "Yes, I did." "And me, I never studied anything." "Well, I only did a little of this and that," the prince added, almost apologetically. "They found it impossible to educate me systematically because of my illness." "You know the Rogozhins?" the swarthy man asked quickly. "No, not at all. I know very few people in Russia. Are you a Rogozhin?" "Yes, I'm Parfeon Rogozhin." "Parfeon? You're not from those same Rogozhins?" the clerk began with increased importance. "Yes, the same, the very same," the swarthy man interrupted quickly and with impolite impatience. He had, incidentally, never once addressed the pimply clerk, but from the very beginning had talked only to the prince. Right, I don't know what you make of that. That's the opening from Dostoevsky's The Idiot. And yes, as I said before I began reading, the novel The Idiot, it's kind of a spirit animal for the podcast. And if you go back all the way back to, I think, the second episode of the podcast, I think it's called Am I a Clown or an Idiot or Both? And I explained the book's significance to me. But I just sort of had an impulse to read the start of that because it has that random meeting on the train of the protagonist and one of the other major players in the novel. And there is something stylistically kind of tricky there in terms of the character of the clerk. I was hovering between the two pronunciations. Who's obviously a sort of a social, well, if not a social climber, a social aspirant. So that's a very particular blip. If we go back to the blip idea, the blip that wants to jump on the tail of another blip, or makes it their business to know who all the blips are in their particular corner of this matrix that I'm imagining. Yeah. So there were a couple of things there. I had to sort of go and do my little bit of research. Conveniently, there's notes with the version of the novel I have. It's a beautiful hardback, Everyman's Library edition of The Idiot. But they refer to a foulard. Now that's foulard, Foulard. I had no idea what that was, but it's basically like a silk scarf, or a very lightweight patterned scarf, and that's what the prince had as his main means of carrying his belongings. And the clerk, I started to think of that clerk as the really obsequious and, in the end, quite villainous character from Ernst Lubitsch's The Shop Around the Corner, which, again, if you're a regular listener to the podcast, you know that's one of my all-time favourite Christmas movies, and maybe just one of my all-time favourite movies. But I was thinking he's that kind of character. Yeah. But look, see, I'm reading that and I'm thinking I could do better here. I could bring these characters to life a bit more, and that's just the acting impulse. But then there's the other part of me that goes, just read the words. Just read the words. The other thing that came up there was a reference to Dutch Golden Boys? And Dutch Golden Boys and Friedrich's doors and Napoleon doors, and they're all references to currency. So yeah, different currencies and different gold coins. So again, what you're getting from that clerk is that the social aspirant, the social kind of climbing, and then the obsession with means and money and wealth, which is always quite classless and petty, isn't it? Is it? That's my feeling. And then there was one other thing, the falling sickness, which I remembered from previous readings. That is a way of describing epilepsy, and I think Dostoevsky suffered from epilepsy. So that's the falling sickness. But they also made reference to Saint Vitus's dance, a sickness akin to that. And I was like, what's this Saint Vitus's dance? And that refers to a product or a symptom of rheumatic fever that results in involuntary convulsions and jerking of the body. And it's named for Saint Vitus, who was a medieval Christian, the son of a pagan senator, but he cast out a spirit from a possessed person. So presumably the person was presenting with these convulsions and shakes, the jerkings, the uncontrollable jerkings of the body and the musculature. And this Vitus character cast out the demon, and he was martyred and he became a saint. And so those symptoms were known as Saint Vitus's dance. And I saw a headline in my research, which was who exactly was Saint Vitus and was he any good at dancing? But that Saint Vitus's dance was subsequently renamed Sydenham's chorea, because it was diagnosed by an English physician named Thomas Sydenham. And so yeah, Sydenham's chorea is how it's now known. So there you go. It's amazing the things you learn. So you're getting we've just kind of stepped into the world of exorcisms there, and how people perceived illness and how people perceived what the body did. as being, possessed by demons, by the devil. I mean, that was, yeah. I'm not about to espouse on medieval medical perspectives, because just like the science, I know not of what I speak. I instantly think of the four humours, which are what? Christ, melancholy's one, isn't it? And the one I always get wrong, phlegmatic, melancholy. There you go, 2 out of 4. It's not great, but sure, I can't be arsed. Yeah, so I had this impulse to read from The Idiot because of that meeting and the randomness, and I mean, ultimately, it's Myshkin's innocence put up against Rogozhin's sort of venality and darkness and impulsiveness and inability to control himself, and his inability to not be cynical and see the worst in people, and they both become obsessed with the same woman. But Rogozhin, of course, is not considered an idiot. It's Myshkin who's considered the idiot, because he's guileless and open and transparent and easy to read. And I suppose I'm sure I must have spoken about it. I wouldn't. I find it a bit kind of. I don't like going back to listen to the old episodes, but I must have spoken about the stalker that I had briefly, a student I had in Melbourne, and she knew I liked the book The Idiot, because I think I was rereading it at the time. I used to have it on me with my pile of books I brought into the classroom, and she was familiar with it, and she used to she started emailing me and addressing me as my Myshkin. And she turned out to be pretty nuts, and invented a husband and invented the sudden passing of her father, and yeah, it was weird. It was very strange, and rather fortuitously, I had the opportunity to take some acting work, which took me away from the school for a couple of months, and she'd moved on to a different school by the time I rejoined, or she was in a different class anyway, and then left the school. But she was a fascinating character as well. She was really interesting. But yeah, it was a strange and intense little spell where I was getting these increasingly irate emails from her that were, yeah, clearly someone who wasn't really in control of what was going on. And yeah, strange stuff. Anyway, funny because I don't know if I'll ever be addressed by anyone ever again in my life as my Myshkin. But the reason the book The Idiot is the spirit animal of the podcast is because, yes, I am an idiot, and I do try to keep something of the idiot's openness and transparency in my personal ethos and my personal credo. And it's about, you've heard me speak about trying to keep an open heart. That's the triumph over the shit that life can deal you. Yeah. And it did get me thinking about the specific, just thinking about train journeys and meeting people on trains. It did get me thinking about the journey that we used to make as kids to London, where we wouldn't fly. We'd get the boat. We'd get the boat, the ferry from Dublin, from Dunleary, in fact, to Holyhead. From Dunleary in South Dublin to Holyhead on the coast of Wales. And then from Holyhead, you'd transfer onto a train that would take you down to London or across to London, whatever way you want to think of it. And I used to love that journey. I used to love that journey as a kid. I used to love getting on the ferry. And the mission was to find a little spot for yourself. And it was kind of a free for all, and you'd find a little table with seats at the at one of the windows on the ferry, and that's where you dump your bags. And then we were just given free rein to roam. Like, it was kind of off you go, open plan. And I remember on one of those crossings, there was a cinema on the boat, and we were able to watch, I think we saw The Goonies. Was that Robert Zemeckis who directed that? Steven Spielberg produced The Goonies, featuring a very young No Country for Old Men, Josh Brolin, son of James, isn't that right? A very young Josh Brolin, and some other kind of child actor stalwarts. It was. I remember that. That was great, because I was just obsessed. Any chance to be in a cinema of any kind, I was delighted with myself. And my favourite part, really, about being on the boat was just when the engines started to rumble as we pulled away out of the port, and just feeling the ferry on the sea, and then being allowed to go out on deck and look over at the water. And I feel like we did that crossing. We did it at night, and we did it in daylight, and I never got bored with it. I always thought it was really, really great, and just it had a particular smell as well. Maybe it was a combination of sea air and what, I don't know, cleaning agents, people, fellow travellers. I'm sure everyone must have been smoking their heads off and drinking their heads off as well. That was an option too. And then you'd get to Holyhead, and it felt like you never had to wait that long before you'd be able to, you'd be sitting on the train, and you had your seat booked, as far as I recall, and you'd make the journey to London. And I do recall, I think we were with my uncle. When I say we, I'm referring to my older brother. So my older brother and I used to do this journey as kids, and we did it with our mother, because we were visiting her mother in London. Her mother had left Ireland basically when her marriage ended, and went to London. And my mother lived in London briefly for a while as well, but her mother remained. So my grandmother spent the last third of her life in London, approximately, maybe the last quarter of her life. And we used to love going there. But that journey in particular, I mean, I've flown to London countless times since over the years, and I don't feel in any way the same way about the plane journey to London. It's sort of, I mean, it's fast, but yeah, there's no excitement to that, and it's I don't know, it's funny that those short hop flights, they almost feel inconvenient. Now, granted, it felt like it would take like the guts of a day to get to London from Ireland back then, doing it that way. Less delightfully, we used to sometimes get the bus. You'd get a bus that would go onto the ferry, and you could walk around the ferry, and then you could get back onto the bus, and the bus would drive to London. And the bus certainly wasn't that thrilling at all, and quite confined, obviously, and cramped, and it just didn't have the same atmosphere. But it was bloody cheap. I think I did that once or twice when I was in acting school in England. So that was whatever, the mid to late 90s. I was still doing that. But yeah, that I remember being on the train once with my uncle and my brother, and my uncle was always great at engaging, strangers and striking up conversation. And I think, for some reason, it was a black guy who he got chatting to, and he produced a bar of Ritter. Do you know that? Confectioner, German. I think they're a German chocolate maker. And I was like, immediately I was like, this is great because it's chocolate. It's sweets, candy, lollies, and my sweet tooth activated instantly. But to my dismay, it was rum and raisin, and I was a devout non-alcoholic and also hated raisins. And yet somehow I forced myself to take some of that chocolate, and I think I even convinced myself that I enjoyed it. But it felt very exotic to me to be sitting there with a black guy taking his rum and raisin chocolate, and that's probably one of my only recollections of meeting someone, a stranger on a train like that, because I was probably just absorbed with the childhood perspectives, and enjoying myself and hanging out with my brother and just wandering around the ferry. Was there a casino on the ferry? Am I imagining that? There was definitely a bar and some sort of dining room, restaurant area, and a shop. I don't know. It was just cool. It was just cool to go and wander and run up and down those staircases, up and down levels to go up on deck, and then just to see the churning water behind, and then to see, to look back and see Ireland being left behind, and to look ahead and see Wales, Wales, England, the UK waiting. And it always felt good. It always felt good to be going to London. It felt good to travel down and to arrive into, I think we used to arrive into Euston Station. I have a recollection of arriving into Paddington once as well, so different trains, I don't know. And then that whole relationship with London and all those famous iconic stations, and then travelling on the tube to get to my grandmother's place, and passing stations like Baker Street and Liverpool Street, whatever it might be, King's Cross, Notting Hill Gate, Hammersmith, and then last stop for us was Ladbroke Grove, which was where my grandmother lived, which I think was the Metropolitan line. Maybe it still is. But yeah, just brilliant. Absolutely loved it. I loved it so much. I'd like to take my daughter just to do it that way once, just to see. Although she's not a fan of long journeys. She, like last week when we went to Connemara, there was lots of whinging and moaning, and that was, more or less 5 hours. The whole journey was a bit more than that. We were stopping so Pepper the dog could have a pee break and whatnot. But yeah, Maeve, she's a reluctant traveller. Anyway, whatever. I'm recording this on Monday. So yesterday was Father's Day, which was nice. I ended up hanging out with Maeve for most of the day, which was lovely. and we had a trip up to Dublin to see somebody, which was cool. And on our return, we had a swim in the river, which was nice. So it's kind of for me, it's the beginning of the river season rather than being in the sea. But there had been a lot of rain. There was a lot of heavy rain over the weekend, so the river was a little bit churned up and pretty dark. So Maeve was a bit unconvinced about the merits of getting into that dark, spooky water. And I observed her body language, and when she's nervous or afraid, she just kind of clutches her hands underneath her chin, elbows kind of tight in together, as she's contemplating and fretting and worrying. So I just tried to reassure her that it wasn't a big deal at all not to swim. And I mean, it's ironic, because only last week I was saying how she'd found her confidence, but she was really tired because she'd had a big sleepover. Actually, it was a big weekend. It's busy. I took herself and a friend, and with Kiara, my wife. We went to see The Little Mermaid on Friday night, because Maeve wanted to see it, and look, it was grand. It was grand. I mean, those live action Disney movies, they somehow all arrive a bit stillborn. If you'll forgive me using that term, there's something inert. Now the young actress playing Ariel the mermaid, Halle Bailey. Yes, Halle Bailey? Hardly Halle Bailey. Halle Bailey. She was really good. She was really, really good. And Melissa McCarthy was excellent as Ursula. But just a bit too long, and the prince, the love interest, was an absolute drip, boring as all get out. Anyway, that was Friday night. That was a late night. Didn't get back here till about 11. And then on Saturday, there was a family party for one of my aunts, my Aunt Maria. The most beautiful girl in know. So Maria was having a significant birthday, and there was a nice family gathering, and then Maeve asked if she could stay the night to hang out with her cousin, whatever way that works. Second cousin or first cousin once removed. I've had versions of that query a million times, and I can never get it straight in my head. Anyway, the daughter of my cousin. So I said yes. And so we came home, and I sat up and watched the director's cut of Ridley Scott's Kingdom of Heaven, which has a lot to recommend it. I remember not being totally convinced by it when I saw it the first time, which wouldn't have been the director's cut. It felt a bit patchy. And I heard one of the guys who's on the Rewatchables, one of my favourite film podcasts to listen to, Chris Ryan is the man in question. He was saying the director's cut is really good. So I watched that, and it was much better. Ultimately, a thing that can happen, Orlando Bloom was probably having a massive moment, the biggest moment of his career, coming off the back of the Lord of the Rings movies, and he is the hero of the piece and the man upon whose shoulders the entire narrative rests. And I just don't think his shoulders were quite strong enough, and he has to make a big speech at the end. I mean, it's fundamentally the story of the kind of medieval crusaders holding Jerusalem and having to fight a huge Muslim army to save it. And at one point towards the end, Orlando Bloom's character has to make a speech to kind of go, hey, we're all in this together. Jerusalem and faith is for everyone. And just going, you're just this kind of young guy making this speech to a load of people, and it's just a bit too Hollywood and a bit too naff. It wasn't When do those speeches work? When do those speeches work? I mean, if that was Sean Bean, I reckon it would have worked. Sean Bean would have been good at that. And he would have been too old to be in that role. But this idea of the young guys, and I know there's a scene. I'm going to give you two more not good examples. One is, for some reason, in Snow White and the Huntsman, with Chris Hemsworth, Charlize Theron, and it's Kristen Stewart, isn't it? Kristen Stewart makes one of those Henry V style rally the troops St. Crispin's Day speeches, and it just doesn't work. And who else? Another English actress whose name I always forget. She was in the Stephen Hawking's movie. She was in the Ruth Bader, you know who I'm talking about, the American Supreme Court Justice, Ruth Bader. Bloody hell's a triple barrel name. Anyway, the actress Felicity something or other. She does one of those speeches in the Star Wars movie Rogue One, and again, it just doesn't work. There's something about the callousness of youth, and you go, really hardened combatants and grown-ups are going to be inspired by this. I don't know, there's something about the grizzled veteran making a speech like that. You go, yeah, let's do it. I'm with you. You've got the experience, you've got the scars, you've got the gravitas, and it just doesn't wash. It doesn't wash with these young, pretty actors and actresses. So I suppose scriptwriters and directors must know that. Yeah. Where I didn't give you an example of when it worked, did I? No. I mean, I am thinking of Kenneth Branagh in his filmed version of Henry V in that speech I referred to. No, I'm drawing a blank. These are the kinds of things you need to sort of sit down and research. Yeah, because I mean, you could do a whole podcast on war movies and rousing speeches and key moments and saying the right thing at the right time. I think Aragorn in The Return of the King, Viggo Mortensen's character, he does something very succinct before one of those final battles, and it's more of a look than a long speech. Anyway, probably you're wishing I would do more of that and just give you a podcast where I just give you a look and then say, mind yourselves, thanks for listening, good luck. That would be a briefer affair altogether, wouldn't it? Okay, well listen, I am going to do that. You listen very closely right now and see if you can hear me give you a look. Did you get it? That was it. I just gave you a look. The look that says, we're not going to take this lying down. We're going to get out of here. We're going to survive to tell this story to our wives, to our husbands, to our children, to our children's children. Okay, that's enough of that. Thanks for listening. Blip. From one blip to another blip. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being on this, sharing this trajectory for this hour and 5 minutes or so. Yeah, I will be back with more next week. So yeah, and yeah, as always, you can reach out, share the love on social media, using whatever your platform is. I'm there on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. All those links or icons will be there wherever you're listening to this. So rate the show, leave a comment, share, subscribe, and if you are so motivated, you can become a patron using the Patreon link, patreon.com/the clear out, and you can throw me, I don't know, the price of a cup of coffee every couple of weeks, once a month, and help me believe this thing is sustainable. Or just feel like you've done something, you're contributing to something creative, something positive, something original. That's good. That's good, isn't it? That's good to get behind something like that. That's good to support this endeavour. That is no, I'm not. I won't start monologuing about trying to justify what I do here. I do it because I do it. That's it. That's all you need to know. All right, on you go, on your bike, on your horse. Take it easy. Always do. Mind yourself. Stay safe. Stay well. Stay positive if you can. But just roll with it. Let the other things happen too, because that's just part of being alive, being human, feeling things, being sentient. And it'll continue, and only you will know about it until you open up and talk, which I value very highly, but not everyone does. Alright, I'll talk to you next week. Take it easy. All the best. Bye.